focus on this slide. This is my only slide. It's my only slide. I really hope that you'll listen to me. But the main point is, when you see the slide, the fellow in the slide and those little medallions off to the right are things that I hope in the time that we spend together, you never forget again for your life. You never forget this man's face, those medallions, what they stand for, and why they are so pertinent in your life, and why I hope you carry them up here with you. There are three things that I want to talk about to kind of support my premise as to why this gentleman is so important. This gentleman, by the way, is Joseph Pulitzer. What you see to the right are what are known as the Pulitzer Prizes. And by the way, just to be clear, it is Pulitzer, not Pulitzer, but Pulitzer. You hear that butchered a lot. And Joseph Pulitzer was really the father of modern journalism, if you will. And the 3 points that I wanted to share with you today as to why I think it is so relevant are these. 1, today you have more information coming at you more rapidly from more sources on more devices than at any time in human history. And it's questionable as to how good of a thing that actually is. Secondly, there is a power shift that took place in media and information exchanges about maybe 15 years ago. You can argue it's the exact timeline, but there was a major power shift that took place where the power used to be with the sender of the message, and now the power is with the receiver of the message. That would be you. And third, that traditional, vetted, modern journalism, watchdog journalism, quality, accurate information that you receive is at great risk. And the consequence of that is significant. So let's walk through those 3 things. First of all, more information coming at you from more sources faster on more devices than ever before. Go ahead, pull them out, you've got them, right? You've got them. You've got them. It's there all the time. It's there all the time, and it's coming at you, whether it's Twitter, or whether it's your favorite news channel, or whether it's your favorite blog, or whether it's Facebook exchange. There is no clock on this anymore. It's 24/7, and there are multiple sources all the time. And it's always accurate, isn't it? It's always accurate, isn't it? No. Second point, and this one I think is significant. Because you have this all of the time, you, as the receiver of the information, now have the power. Historically, with media and most mass information exchange, if you think about it, when I grew up, and until maybe 15 or 20 years ago, it was the sender of the information that had and controlled the power. So whether it was your daily newspaper, whether it was your nightly news, whether it was a radio broadcast, whether it was a magazine or periodical that was produced that talked about the events of the day, they really controlled not just the information you received, but when you received it. There was a nice little cycle of when the information came out. It was on the 6 o'clock news. It was on morning drive time of the radio. It came with your morning or evening newspaper or your weekly or monthly magazine. Those people who were in charge, the senders of that information, of gathering this great information, whether it's breaking news, watchdog journalism, might be advertising, could be a movie review, they were charged with gathering all this information and going through a process called editing or curating that information to ensure its accuracy, its timeliness, its thoroughness. And through that process, in that cycle they had, they gave it to you. And they gave it to you with the hope that they'd done the best job possible to give you accurate, vetted information. But today, it just comes at you all the time. And it's important to be fast. It's important to be quick. It's important to get it out there. We'll clean up the mess later if we're inaccurate. We want you to get it. Have you seen any examples recently that you can think of, say in the last year, 3 years, 5 years, of major news stories where what you heard first, what became gospel right away, what spread through on your phones and in your networks was maybe not so accurate? And that brings me to my third point. And that is because you have it coming at you from so many places so quickly on so many devices. And because now the people that produce that information, their business model is under attack. The financial underpinnings of traditional vetted journalism are under attack, and the competition of different sources, whether it be a blogger of great intent and great integrity, or maybe somebody who isn't of great intent or doesn't have the best integrity, that information is coming at you as soon as they can possibly develop it. And so it's not necessarily going through that vetting process. The competition for your attention is great. And if they get your attention, and you're on their channel or you're looking at their information, they have the ability then to try to monetize that or to try to use that to influence you. In and of itself, not a bad concept. But at what price do you potentially pay? And that's why I say that the traditional media is under siege right now from a financial standpoint to be able to continue to be able to provide you with accurate information. So 3 quick points. What do they have to do with this guy? The theme was, again, Jonathan, old world, old ideas serving us in a modern world. So Joseph Pulitzer, had you heard the name before? Raise your name if you've heard this name before, the Pulitzer Prizes. Joseph Pulitzer came to the United States from Hungary in the late 1800s. He came because he had this fascinating notion about serving in the Civil War, and he joined the Union Army. He was a terrible soldier. He wasn't very athletic, and he was sickly. And he survived the war, and he ended up in St. Louis, Missouri. And while he was in St. Louis, Missouri, he took any job he could get. He was raking stalls of horse stables, etc. He ended up meeting, because he was an intellectual, he ended up meeting some people who were involved in journalism. And so he got a job at a newspaper. And from that, he parlayed it into buying 2 newspapers, the Post and the Dispatch in St. Louis, and he put them together. And he became a very bold journalist in the terms of taking on the establishment, of challenging ideas, of not saying that the rich and the privileged are necessarily always right, but fighting for the underdog. And so he parlayed that into a pretty successful newspaper. Then one day, somebody didn't like what he wrote, and they came to the newspaper, and they picked an argument with the editor, and they got quite heated, and the editor shot and killed that person in the office, and so Joseph Pulitzer thought it would be a good idea to get out of town. So he went to New York City. While he was there, on the lam, if you will, he found another newspaper to buy, the New York World, which was a dying newspaper in New York City at the time, before the turn of the century. And Joseph Pulitzer, because he was such an innovator, took the New York World and rapidly made it the largest newspaper in the world, the most influential newspaper in the world. And what he did was he appealed to all the immigrants coming in and helped them assimilate. Just a little background story to say how this meteoric rise in these new techniques of telling stories and quality journalism led to very much a successful business enterprise. But like any successful business enterprise, once it's there, somebody will challenge it. So there was a young man, I believe that had been dismissed from Harvard University, who was in New York, who asked Pulitzer if he could join his staff. And he did. And his dad had a newspaper in San Francisco, and he was always communicating with his father, "Dad, you ought to be doing what Pulitzer's doing." And eventually this person decided he'd do it on his own. So he started his own, or he bought his own newspaper. So Joseph Pulitzer in the New York World got into a competition with the New York Journal. Now there were a lot of newspapers competing, but these two really went at it. And in their zest to be first, in their zest to be the one readers turned to, in their zest to be the one that captivated the audience, they didn't necessarily tell the truth all the time. They got caught up into this. And it was typified by the silliest of things. It was really typified by a cartoon. Joseph Pulitzer, one of the most popular features in his newspaper, was a little cartoon on the front page usually called The Yellow Kid. And the Yellow Kid was always up to something, or he was criticizing the foes of Pulitzer, he was criticizing the wealthy, or he was doing something like Dennis the Menace. Well, the other fella, he actually, because he knew how successful it was, he hired away the cartoonist to his newspaper who was doing the Yellow Kid, so he had a Yellow Kid. Then Pulitzer got his own Yellow Kid cartoonist, another one. And so this battle back and forth between two silly cartoons came to speak to the whole premise of sensationalism. and yellow journalism. Have you ever heard that term? Yellow journalism and sensationalism. And what it meant was they got so caught up in trying to beat each other, to be first, to capture people's attention, they lost sight of the importance of accuracy. So much so that reports from their two newspapers, historians now say, particularly the New York Journal, led, unfortunately, because of false reports, to the Spanish-American War. Because the owner of, and that's been attributed, of the New York Journal, thought a war would be a good thing to tell more stories, to sell more newspapers. Anybody want to take a stab at who the other gentleman was? William Randolph Hearst. So if you've ever heard those two names in the history, it's significant. Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. That old story applies definitely to today, because it speaks to the importance of accuracy. Because Joseph Pulitzer, this gentleman right here, who I don't want you to forget, I don't want you to forget him, take him out of here with you. And those medallions, because he reflected on what he had gotten engaged in. And he understood the consequence of not being accurate, of being sensational, of not telling the entire story. And so, as an atonement, before he died, he endowed the first graduate school of journalism at Columbia, and he endowed forever the Pulitzer Prizes to be a reminder to those of us about the importance of that accuracy, of getting the story right. So let me pull this all together as I wrap up. What's that have to do with you? Why do I want you to take him home with you? Because remember what I said earlier? The power has shifted from the sender of the message to the receiver of the message. Joseph Pulitzer was the sender of the message. William Randolph Hearst was the sender of the message. Make no mistake. But today that power, they wouldn't have the same power. You do. Because there are so many messengers, so many senders of information. You need to be, I need to be, we need to be the ones who are in the position to challenge and vet the accuracy of a story. The accuracy of a story. And as much as I had the privilege of being influenced by Joseph Pulitzer to have that stick in my mind, I had the opportunity to work for the Pulitzer family for 10 years, running the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. So I knew the story well. I thought about it. I got the importance of it. But it wasn't there that I learned the real lesson. It was one day while I worked there where we were having battles between management and the unions. Battles between managements and the unions. And it happens from time to time. They can be of good intent. But I had become convinced in my mind as a publisher of the paper of what we needed to accomplish and why. My message was clear. My intent was clear. But was I accurate? So as I sat at the dinner table one night and shared the story with my family, our 3 kids and my wife, because I knew the story was going to be in the media and there'd be bad things said about the unions and bad things said about their father. And I told them the story. Here's what we're doing. Here's why. I tried to be as accurate as I possibly could in that message. And my oldest son sat there and he said, "You know, Dad, I love you." And this is where I learned my lesson. He said, "I love you, Dad. But before I can make up my mind, I have to ask myself, what is the union gentleman telling his children at the dinner table tonight?" That's a question Joseph Pulitzer would have been very proud of. And it's a question I would ask you to continually ask yourself as you take him out with you. When you receive information, challenge that source, challenge the accuracy, challenge the thoroughness of it. Because there aren't going to be Joseph Pulitzers anymore sitting up on high sending us messages who care that much. Because it's reversed, now it has to be all of us who receive the information who have to demand more. Thank you very much.